Hello, Gaston County, and welcome to episode number 6 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and we are coming to you from the worldwide headquarters of GSM Services right here in downtown Gastonia, and we are looking forward to having some great discussions in the coming weeks and months. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We are highlighting another great organization this week, and we're very fortunate to have Renee Anthony with us, who is the Executive Director of the Heart Society of Gaston County. Renee, it's great to have you, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to get right to it. If you don't mind, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you ended up here and part of the Heart Society?
Well, sure. I'm a Gaston County native. My husband and I have been married for 36 years. We don't have any children, but we're both huge animal lovers. And we have 2 little fur babies that we adopted from a rescue about 8 years ago, and they are both a mess. They have so much personality. There's never a dull moment with them. As far as spare time, I really enjoy reading, love to be outside, and have a passion for working with the children program at our church.
Okay, what church is that?
Renlow Baptist.
Okay, very good. So how did you end up at the Heart Society?
Actually, by accident.
Okay.
I had applied for a position at another organization and was not hired there, but they said there is another place, the Heart Society, and they have an opening, and we think you would be perfect. We think that would be a great fit for you. And so I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a try. So I interviewed there and was hired. And it was a pretty good fit because next week I'll have been there 34 years.
Wow.
So
that's a long time.
Pretty good fit. And it was Caroline Garrison who recommended me to seek employment at the Heart Society. She said, I just think it's the perfect place for you.
Well, Caroline was terrific. I got to know her through our Rotary Club, and she was a powerhouse
Awesome.
here in Gaston County, and really was involved with so many things, and really helped start a lot of things too here in the county.
She was amazing.
So can you share with us, or do you know kind of the history of the Heart Society of Gaston County and how it got started?
Yes, in 1952, the Heart Society was started as a chapter of the American Heart Association and remained a part of the American Heart Association until 1982. At that point in time, the volunteers who were on the board of directors were concerned about 2 things, and one was the amount of money that they were raising that was not being kept here in the county. And the other was that they wanted to be able to develop programs to meet needs that they saw here in this community rather than having those programs mandated by a parent organization. So at that point in time, those volunteers decided to disaffiliate from the American Heart Association and form the Heart Society of Gaston County and joined with the United Way. And we've been a United Way partner agency ever since.
Yeah, that's interesting, and how everything ties in. I'm the current chair of the board of the United Way.
Yes.
And I think actually the last time maybe was when we did the check presentation from with you, and I think the honey hunters were involved with that, and from the United Way. So that's always good to hear that story. And to your point, most organizations like that, they want to do things locally, right? They want to stay focused on making an impact locally, and sometimes those bigger organizations may not have that same vision. So what can you tell us kind of just in general, or what is the mission overall of the Heart Society?
We try to focus on 3 things. One is increasing awareness of heart disease. The other is promoting heart-healthy lifestyles, and then providing services to people who already have heart disease. So those are the 3 areas that everything we do falls into one of those categories.
So as long as some program or somebody comes to you, as long as it falls in one of those 3, that's something you would typically consider. Mm-hmm. So along those same lines, I mean, can you talk about some of the initiatives that the Heart Society is involved with or has taken on?
Yes, we have 2 main program areas. One is medication assistance, and that is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. We have a program where we provide cardiac-related medications to clients who don't have the money to get their own prescriptions. And we do that in two ways. One is that we buy medication through local pharmacies. The other is that we enroll clients in the drug company programs if their prescription is available there and if they meet the eligibility requirements that the drug companies provide or that they have in place. We have clients who have insurance but can't always afford their copay. We have clients who do not have insurance but work every day, but just in a job that doesn't on a regular basis provide enough money for them to be able to buy their own medication. We have senior citizens who have Medicare D plans and end up in the coverage gap and need help. So clients all over the place in lots of different circumstances. And the prescriptions that they ask us for cost anywhere from $3 on a regular basis. We have almost daily people calling our office in tears almost because they can't afford a $3 prescription. And then some of the medications are hundreds of dollars, just depending on what the client takes. We have about 10% of our clients are seniors and a lot that are in their 30s and 40s, and they just can't always afford their medication. And the reason that it's so important that we provide that program is that the cardiac-related drugs don't just treat symptoms. They help to keep the heart disease from getting worse. They help to prevent the heart attack, the stroke, the heart failure. So basically that program saves lives, and the outcomes for it prove that. And we see that our clients have fewer complications that are leading them to be hospitalized. We know from studies that when people don't take their cardiac-related medications and take them the way that they're prescribed, that they have serious consequences. Sometimes people even die as a result of not having their medication.
How do, before we get to the second initiative, I think you mentioned there were two primary ones. How do you, the individuals you serve through that program, how do you find out about the needs and how do they get in touch with you? I mean, what's the typical way that somebody would do that?
Mm-hmm. We receive a lot of referrals from the physicians here in town.
Okay.
From DSS, the caseworkers at DSS, and we also have a very close relationship with Caramont Regional Medical Center.
Okay.
And their caseworkers, when a patient is being discharged and they have these cardiac medications and they say, well, I can't afford those, then they refer them to us. And we actually have a very formalized referral process with them where they will contact us, the caseworker will contact our office and give us the patient's name and contact information, and then we contact them directly rather than putting that on the patient, that responsibility on the patient. And the reason for that is a lot of these people are newly diagnosed with a serious heart condition. They're nervous, they're upset,
right.
They're confused, they're overwhelmed, their families are. And so they're leaving the doctor with this, the hospital with this diagnosis and all this medicine that they know they can't afford. With us contacting them rather than them having to try to reach out to us, it makes it a little easier for them. And it also ensures timely access to the help so we can get them enrolled in our program and make sure there's no lapse in time that they do without any medication.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a high-stress moment for anyone to get some type of diagnosis, and I would assume, unless there's really something unusual, they wouldn't have any idea what to do.
Right,
and
exactly.
They got other things to worry about, right,
Exactly.
at that moment. So I think you mentioned there were two primary initiatives. What was the second one?
The other one is that we provide cardiovascular health education. That's our other program area. And we target adults and youth with that. Primarily, we reach adults through free cholesterol and blood pressure screenings, that we have analyzers that we take on site to do the testing and give results at the time of the screening so that we can encourage them to follow up with their doctor if their results are outside the goal level, if they're at risk.
Right.
And we can explain what those results mean, what can happen if it's left untreated, they don't do anything about it, and then strongly encourage them to visit their doctor to get that diagnosis and treatment. For youth, we do age-appropriate programs in the Gaston County schools.
Okay.
And it's important, because the earlier we start that heart health education, the less likely that they will develop bad habits that they will have to unlearn as an adult. And with our cholesterol and blood pressure screenings, that's important because in the early stages, the high cholesterol and high blood pressure really doesn't present symptoms, but the damage has already started inside the body. So we can go ahead and alert that person, hey, you're at risk, you need to get to your doctor. And last year, I think the figure was 30 or 35% of our clients who went to the doctor were put on medication. So if you think about that in terms of what we were able to prevent for those people on down the road, had that high blood pressure or high cholesterol been left untreated, they could have had a heart attack or stroke over time.
Yeah, I can almost assure you that young people are not thinking about their heart, right? No. They should, but unless they're exposed to that. You mentioned, I think, before talking about the youth, you mentioned screenings and events. Where would a typical screening be done? Is that?
We do businesses here in the community. We try to target places where there's a high likelihood that maybe those folks are not going to the doctor or not being tested. But basically any business or any civic organization just really has varied over the years.
So in your 34 years, which is an extremely long time at the Heart Society, can you kind of think of one thing that you are most proud of, or you or the organization has accomplished in the last 34 years?
It would be the outcomes for our programs and the life-saving impact that they make for the clients, and the stories that we hear when clients follow up with their doctor, or and the outcome surveys. We do our surveys of clients to gather out data for outcomes, and it's that life-saving impact.
Can you think of specific examples? I mean, obviously, we never ask you to share any names, but a specific example where an individual or a family was affected, positively from speaking of outcomes.
Yeah, definitely. Recently, we had a lady who was in her early 50s and had a heart attack, and the chest pain was the first symptom that she had any heart disease. She had no idea. She went to the emergency department. They put a stent in and discharged her with a prescription for a blood thinner. And when she went to the pharmacy to get that filled, she was shocked to find out that the cost was $400 for this blood thinner that her cardiologist had said you have to have because it keeps the blood from clotting around that stent and closing it back up. And so she called her doctor and said, look, I can't afford this. So they were like, okay, we know where you can go, referred her to the Heart Society. And in talking with her, this lady was almost hysterical because she remembered the chest pain and how bad it was. And she remembered the fear that she was going to die when she was having that heart attack. And knowing that her doctor said, you have to have this prescription or this can happen again. But she knew she works in a restaurant and makes minimum wage. And a $400 prescription was never going to fit in her budget. So because of the Heart Society's medicine program, she didn't have to worry about that anymore.
So I bet you hear stories like that, I bet, all the time.
Countless.
Okay.
Countless.
Do you know how many, on an average year, say through the medication assistance program, how many individuals do you typically serve? Or
it varies each year based on the cost of the medication because our funds, will be limited. We have a certain amount of money that we can spend, but it's usually 225 roughly. But last year, every dollar that we invested in the program provided more than $2 in medication. So, you can't just look at the number of people.
Right.
That's not very impressive, a couple hundred people in a year's time. But when you provided $250,000 worth of medication to those clients, including the free medications we got from the drug companies, that's pretty more representative of what the program does.
Also, I've learned over time with things like this, if there's 225 people you served, what about their family members and their friends and the other people that were touched? You could say indirectly, but mostly directly by either having that individual around longer or somebody that they really care about. So that always expands out to a larger group of individuals and people that are actually served. So that's it's always good to hear the specific stories. Can you kind of remember that this is a podcast about Gaston's Great, right? Why would you say Gaston County is better because the Heart Society is here?
I think it goes back again to those outcomes. It's because the people that we're helping are able to still function and be part of our community. They're able to still work and take care of themselves and their families, and
it's always about the people, right? Yeah. It's always about the people. But what I really like, what I'm hearing from you is, there's a lot of organizations that don't get some of that feedback and are able to measure and get real anecdotal evidence about the actual outcomes. So it's really good to hear that. Kind of on the same lines, where does the Heart Society get most of its support and most of its financial support and funding?
The United Way of Gaston County. Okay. We have 3 special events: the Heart Ball, the Heart Walk, and the golf tournament. And then individual donors and grants, and we participate in the Community Foundation's run, Gaston Community Foundation run.
That's been a great event. I mean, going on, I don't know how many years now, but I remember the very first year, and gosh, how that has expanded and how many agencies and organizations are supported by that. So is there one of those events, I think you named 3 events, is there one specific one that kind of is the maybe the longest running or the one that raises the most funds for the organization each year?
Yes, that would be the Heart Ball.
Okay.
It's 54 years now, I think.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure. We missed a year. We couldn't have the Heart Ball this year because of the virus.
Many things events like this were affected in the past year.
Yeah, the Heart Ball, wearing a mask and social distancing really doesn't fit in too well with the Heart Ball, but that is our largest fundraiser. In
full disclosure, I think GSM, I mean, we're not a huge sponsor of that, but we have been a small sponsor of that event for many years. And so it's just another example of something we feel strongly about and to try to help organizations here that are making such a big impact as the Heart Society. If you can look ahead, the next 5 to 10 years, what do you envision the organization looking like down the road?
I would hope that we would be even stronger and able to do even more to save lives in our community.
How this is a question I just thought of. How big is there a staff? Do you have a staff that you work with, or is it just you?
No, we have a huge staff at the Heart
that's what
Society.
I thought.
There are 2 of us. We have 2 paid staff at the Heart Society, and the reason we're able to do that is because of the phenomenal volunteers that we have. We have volunteers who help with programs. We have volunteers who run our special events. We have just the best volunteers in the world. And, I mean, we have probably 6 or 8 volunteers that I can think of right offhand who have volunteered consistently with our organization for decades. There is one who was volunteering at the Heart Society when I came to work there 34 years ago, and he's still actively involved in our organization.
Oh, wow, that's terrific.
And that's what makes us strong.
Isn't there, I think I remember just, again, this is going by memory, looking at maybe the board makeup and looking at some of the events. Isn't there a lot of support from volunteers from the medical community here locally?
Yeah, huge. We have a lot of cardiologists on our board. They have done so much for us over the years and continue to be so supportive personally and professionally.
It seems like I remember the Jingle Bell Gents event that United Way we did it 2 years ago. We did a virtual one or video one this year, I believe, if I remember correctly. Wasn't it Dr. Major?
Yes.
Was, because we got, being involved with United Way, I got to really pay attention to all those, and that was terrific. He did a terrific job. I know Dr. Major on a personal level, as well as several cardiologists from Caramont. So, yeah, that was an extremely well done video.
Well, thank you. We had a lot of fun doing it.
So, if you were not doing this 34 years worth, What do you think you would be doing if you weren't involved with the Heart Society?
I think maybe something ministry related with children is probably where I would go. But I mean, I've done this for so long,
Right.
I'm not sure that anything else would fit.
Yeah, the 6 episodes that we've done so far, that question typically leads to something similar, because I think my experience is when you're involved with something like the Heart Society or a nonprofit or something that is so focused on serving others and serving the community, that's something that is typically in the heart of somebody, and it's not just, no pun intended, but that's something that I would imagine that the same individual would be involved somehow serving others, or regardless of what the specifics might be. Before we kind of move on to a couple shift gears here in a few minutes, is there anything that you can think of you'd want to share, or something I haven't asked that you'd like to share about the Heart Society?
Just the main thing is, we're a local organization here to meet needs right here in this community, and then which we've already talked about, and then the role that our volunteers play.
Very good. So looking back 34 years and kind of thinking about how you got into it, what advice would you give someone who might want to get involved with an organization like this, either from both a volunteer standpoint or even a career standpoint?
The work is hard. The work is very hard, but it is so fulfilling that it dims the struggle that you have on a regular basis. And of course, this past year and a half has presented some very unusual circumstances and struggles, but it's that it is hard work. There's nothing easy about it, and it takes so much of you and your heart, for lack of I don't want to say a pun there, but it takes so much of you.
Sure.
If you're not personally invested in it, working for a nonprofit or volunteering with a nonprofit, you don't just clock in at 8 o'clock and clock out at 5 o'clock.
I also imagine it would be very hard not to get personally connected and with some of the individuals that you're serving. That would be it would just be normal to do that. So that's really good. And again, goes back to any work like this, you just have to, it's not a clock in at 9 and go home at 5, right?
Exactly.
There's always more involved. But at the same time, ultimately, that's how organizations like this thrive and survive and are able to serve the community so well. So we're going to come back to the Heart Society before we finish, but we're going to kind of really shift gears from what we've been talking about. And this is what we call, for, again, lack of a better phrase, our Gaston County speed round of questions. We're really getting to the important stuff now. I know that everybody listening, maybe we're up to 13, I'm going to say 13 listeners this week. This is what they're really coming to hear. So we're going to first start off with a really, really important question. What is your favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
Chocolate.
That is terrific. That is exactly mine. Some of these other people have been on here acting wacky, like Benny Cherry, who like lemon. I think I might say that in every single episode going forward, so he will remember. Sundrop or Cheerwine?
Sundrop.
Okay. I wonder if Sundrop is cardiologist approved.
I don't think any of these answers I'm giving you right now will please my board of directors. So just keep in mind, it's all balance, variety, and moderation as far as diet goes.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I see Dr. Letts quite often, and so he'll probably give me a hard time when he hears some of these questions. Yes. So do you prefer Eastern or Western style North Carolina barbecue?
Neither. I'm pescatarian, so the only meat that I eat is fish.
Okay, well.
Actually, I'm more vegetarian than that. But
that will please all of our cardiologist friends very much. In fact, that's probably the question that would really get me in trouble with my cardiologist, actually. So favorite local place to visit or thing to do here in Gaston County?
I really like the Greenway. I think that is very, it's so cool. You'll see people biking, running, walking, just lots of different things going on there.
That has been a great addition, right, to Gaston County. And I have ran many a mile on the Greenway and all different sections of it. This might not be an unfair question, but I'm going to ask anyway because everybody here knows I'm an NC State guy. So UNC Duke or NC State?
Oh, UNC. Sorry.
Renee.
Sorry. So sorry.
Well, don't apologize. I married a Tar Heel, so I have a mixed family. I do have one as a child at NC State right now, and the children overall are all NC State. So it took me a while to get that. So my wife is kind of outnumbered at our house, but that's a acceptable answer for the most part. Can you share something that maybe very few people know about you?
I have a completely, totally irrational fear of heights. If a light bulb needs to be changed and it requires climbing more than 2 steps on the step stool, I'm just in the dark.
I think that's probably...
It's completely irrational.
Actually, gravity when you're somewhere high is not irrational. That's a pretty common thing, I believe, but I appreciate that. How about I think you mentioned earlier that you like reading. Is there a recent book that you've read that you would recommend?
Yes, The Nightingale.
Okay.
It's a historical fiction novel. I think the author was Kristen Hanna.
Okay.
It's an awesome book, one of those that when you finish with it and put it down, the characters are still with you for a long time.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, historical fiction actually is something I have. There are some really good historical fiction out there that are around events, and I appreciate that greatly. I will add that to my list. So again, thanks for kind of helping us get off on a little rabbit hole there. But we kind of like to again hit some Gaston County highlights as well. So we're getting close to finishing up here, but just a couple more questions. So first is, besides the Heart Society of Gaston County, what would you say is one of the reasons or some of the reasons why Gaston is great?
I think it's all about the people, and it's the way the people in this community care for each other, the way that they see issues or problems and then mobilize to try to take care of that. I mean, just look at the number of nonprofits in this community, and every nonprofit has to rely on volunteers to be able to do what they do. And so I think it's hands down, it's the people in this community.
That's been a common theme, and I would agree. Things that happen in this community, and look around, and you have so many people that move here, and they realize after, I was been fortunate going to college away and visiting all parts of the country through organizations I'm involved with, but there's just no place quite like Gaston County, and it is about the people and the things that get accomplished, and so I appreciate greatly that answer. So if you look back, I'm sure it's just a couple of years ago, but if you look back on where you're at now and looking back to your 20-year-old self, is there any advice that you would give yourself now looking back a few years ago?
Well, that's just so recent, but no, I think it would be to be intentional with your time, especially because, of course, it goes by so quickly, but not to be so wrapped up in planning for the next thing that's coming that you miss what's in this day.
Right. Yeah, intentionality is a terrific word and concept, and I know when I was 20, I had zero perspective on that. Man, and looking back, I wish I could. And you're right. Life happens while you're planning for the future.
Exactly.
And so having that intentionality of actions and interactions with others, it could have made my 20s and 30s maybe a little better. It's just funny how you get that perspective now, right?
Definitely.
You don't necessarily have it back then. Well, Renee, I can't thank you enough. This has been really great. Where can listeners go to learn more about the organization or get involved, volunteer, send money, or contact you directly? How can they go about that?
Probably the best way is through our website. It's heartgaston.org.
Okay.
And there's a link there. You can make donations there. You can contact us, and that will drop directly into our email, and we can get back in touch with you there. If you have questions, need our services, want to be involved as a volunteer, any of that, it's the best way.
Okay, that's absolutely critical, and we'll be sure to put that information in our show notes, so it'll be easy to get access to that. So again, Renee, thanks so much for your time, and we're looking forward, and hopefully you'll get some benefit from this, because I know the Heart Society sure does a great job benefiting Gaston County. So we're about ready to wrap this up, and we're going to continue what we did with the last episode and kind of finish up with my own quote or thought of the week. And this one comes from Will Rogers, who is one of my favorites. If you want to find a man or an individual who pretty much has said something about everything, he's the guy to go to. And this one is about progress. And many years ago he said, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. I love that quote because it talks about got to change over time. You got to view things differently. If you can be going literally in the right direction, as he says, but you got to keep evolving and changing. And my book recommendation for this week is one I've read in the past year. It's called Atomic Habits by a gentleman named James Clear. It's a good one to check out, especially with some of the bad habits maybe that have devolved in my life in the last year with the challenges that we've accepted or had to deal with. It's been easy to develop some of my older habits that maybe I had done a good job of getting rid of. They've kind of crept back into my life. So again, Atomic Habits by James Clear. So thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please spread the word if you can about this. And please don't hesitate to contact us here at podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com. And please follow us on our social media platforms. You can also find us and subscribe on most podcast services such as iTunes, Spotify, and Google. Thanks again to Renee Anthony from the Heart Society of Gaston County for being our guest today. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.